The distance between Troy and Ithaca is 565 nautical miles, which is around 1,000 kilometers, about the distance from Rome to Athens. A modern sailboat covers that in under a week. A speedboat could do it in less than a day. A plane does it in about 90 minutes. And yet one of the most famous voyages in all of human history, Odysseus trying to get home, took him 10 years. And the worst part is, he probably could have walked it in about a month. He had 12 ships and 600 men with him, and if they'd all just gotten off the boats and walked, they would have beaten him home by about 9 years. You're probably thinking, okay, it's just a myth. Homer was making up a good story and he was exaggerating that it took him 10 years. Actually, Homer's own poems tells us the real travel time. Another hero left the same beach at Troy and was home in about just 4 days. And the audience hearing these stories, they were sailors. They knew exactly how long the trip should take. So the 10 years isn't bad storytelling. It's actually the whole point of the story. So what was actually going on? Here's a detail most people don't know. At one point in those 10 years, Odysseus got close enough to see his own island, and then didn't set foot on it for another 9 years. How does something like that happen? Well, the answer comes down to what sailing was really like 3,000 years ago, and it was nothing like most of us imagine. But before we get into it, let's quickly run through the story itself, because it's probably been a while since you last heard it. About 3,000 years ago, the Greeks sailed across the sea to attack a rich city called Troy, in what is now Turkey. The war lasted 10 years, and the Greeks finally won it with a trick, a giant wooden horse with soldiers hidden inside. The guy who came up with that trick was Odysseus, a king from a small Greek island called Ithaca. So the war is over, Odysseus has been away for 10 years, his wife Penelope and his son, who was a baby when he left and is now 10 years old, are waiting for him on Ithaca. All he has to do is sail home. That trip is what we call the Odyssey. So let's go back to that moment. A few weeks into the journey, Odysseus actually did almost make it home. Early in the journey, he lands on an island ruled by a man named Aeolus. In the story, Aeolus is the keeper of the winds. The gods have put him in charge of them. And he likes Odysseus, so he gives him an incredible gift. He catches every wind that could blow the ships off course, stuffs them into a leather bag, ties it shut, and leaves only one wind free, the one blowing straight towards Ithaca. For 9 days and 9 nights, they sail without a single problem. They get so close that Odysseus can see the island. The poem says he could see the fires burning on the shore, his home, right there, and then he falls asleep. He'd been steering the ship himself for 9 days straight, and while he sleeps, his crew starts eyeing that leather bag. They figure it's full of silver and gold that he's not sharing, so they open it. Every storm wind escapes at once. The ships get blown all the way back across the sea, right back to where they had started. Odysseus was close enough to see his home in year 1. He wouldn't set foot on it for another 9. Now, a bag of winds is obviously a myth, but to a sailor living 3,000 years ago, that bag might have been the most realistic thing in the whole poem. To understand how one mistake can cost you a decade, you have to understand what these ships actually were. If you think about an old ship, you're probably thinking of something like a pirate ship, and that's probably not the right way to think about it. A ship in 1200 BC was basically a big open rowboat without any cabins, lower deck, or roof. It was just one mast, one square sail, and about 50 oars, which meant 50 guys rowing. Now the problem with a big square sail is that it's essentially a big bedsheet. It works great when the wind pushes you from behind, and it's useless when the wind comes from where you're trying to go. So if the wind was against you, your options were row, which is exhausting and slow, sit on a beach and wait, or go somewhere else. Homer describes crews waiting on the beach for weeks for the wind to change. That was just a normal sailing life. They also had no compass. That invention was still 2,000 years away, and no maps. The oldest map of the world we know of wouldn't be drawn for another 600 years. Every route existed in one place only, inside the heads of experienced sailors. You knew the way to Troy, and you knew the way to your grandma's house, this headland and that island, and then that mountain on the horizon. At night, they use the stars, and Homer actually shows us this. At one point in the story, a goddess gives Odysseus sailing directions. Keep the Great Bear and the Big Dipper on your left side. That line is one of the oldest written descriptions of navigating by the stars that we have. And the winds? The winds weren't just weather to these people. They were the whole system. The Greeks gave each wind its own name and its own god. Boreas from the north, Notos from the south, Zephyrus from the west, Eurus from the east. And when your entire life depends on which way the wind blows, and you can't really do a single thing about it, a magic bag that holds every wind isn't a fairy tale. It's a sailor's ultimate fantasy. Control over the one thing that ruled your life. But there's an even bigger problem, one that most people never think about. These ships had to land every single night. Think about it. 50 rowers working hard in the sun will drink through all the fresh water on board in a day or 2. There's no room to sleep on an open boat. There's no kitchen. So every evening, the whole voyage stops, finds a shore, drags the ship up onto the beach, and goes looking for water and food. But you don't know that shore. You don't know who lives there or how they feel about strangers. Every single night of the voyage is a knock on a stranger's door. Now, if we look back through the Odyssey with this in mind, the pattern is everywhere. The Cyclops, they'd landed to look for food. The giants who destroyed 11 of his 12 ships, they'd landed looking for water and a safe harbor. The witch Circe, they landed because they were exhausted and starving. Almost every monster story in the poem starts the exact same way. We went ashore, because going ashore every night on unknown beaches was actually the danger of sailing. The monsters live exactly where the real fear lived, and there was one more rule on top of all of this. The calendar. A Greek poet named Hesiod, writing around 700 BC, put it in writing. The safe sailing season was only about 50 days a year, in the middle of summer. The rest of the year, the storms could kill you. So if something pins you down, bad weather, a broken hull, and you miss your window, you're not late by a few weeks. You wait for next summer. You're late by a year. So where did it all go wrong for Odysseus? There was one exact spot where Greek voyages went wrong. Every sailor knew about it, and Homer names it. It's called Cape Malea. In the southern tip of mainland Greece, it's the place where the calm, island-hopping part of the trip ends and the open sea begins, and where winds coming from different directions slam into each other. It's a real place, and sailors feared it for thousands of years. The ancient Greeks literally had a proverb, round Cape Malea and forget your home, and that is exactly where Homer puts the disaster. Odysseus rounds Cape Malea, and within days of home, a storm grabs his fleet and drives it out to sea for 9 days straight. Everything in the poem before Cape Malea you can find on the map. Real town, real islands, real distances. Everything after those 9 days, the Lotus Eater, the Cyclops, Circe, nobody has ever been able to place. People have been trying for over 2,000 years. Even Eratosthenes, the head of the Great Library of Alexandria, the man who calculated the size of the earth, thought the search was silly. He joked, "You'll find Odysseus' route on a map the day you find the guy who sewed the bag of winds." The poem draws a line at Cape Malea. On one side is the world the sailors knew. On the other side is a world they'd only heard rumors about. Blow a ship past that line, and as far back as anyone home knows, you've sailed off the edge of the map. Now maybe you're thinking this is all guesswork. How do we really know how slow and hard this was? Well, people have actually tested it. In 1985, an explorer named Tim Severin built a replica of an ancient Greek galley and sailed it along Odysseus' actual route, starting at Troy. He spent the voyage pinned down by headwinds, crawling from headland to headland, waiting on beaches for the weather to change, exactly like the poem describes. Then, in 2008, a group of Greek volunteers built the Argo, a full replica of 50-oar ship using old-style methods. They rowed it from Greece to Venice, about 650 miles, roughly the same distance as Odysseus' trip home. It took them almost 2 months, rowing 10 to 18 hours a day, and these were fit modern rowers with weather forecasts, support boats, and nobody trying to kill them on the beaches. 2 months. Now take away the forecast and put a crew that just fought a 10-year war on the oars. That's the real math of 565 miles. And if you want proof of what happened to the ships that lost that math, in 1982, a diver off the coast of Turkey found a shipwreck from almost exactly Odysseus' time. It's called the Uluburun wreck, and it was carrying 10 tons of cargo. Copper from Cyprus, tin from as far away as Central Asia, amber from the Baltic, gold from Egypt, a real Bronze Age ship, making real long-distance voyages, carrying a fortune, and it's on the bottom of the sea. The best preserved Bronze Age ship we've ever found is one that didn't make it. Odysseus' own number tells the same story. 12 ships and about 600 men left Troy with him. 1 man made it home. And when Homer's audience heard that number, they didn't hear a fantasy. Fleets really did vanish. And that brings us to the twist that's always been hiding in the poem this whole time. Because if you go through the Odyssey and count the days Odysseus actually spent sailing, actually out on the water and moving, you get a strange answer. It's about 2 months. 2 months of sailing inside a 10-year story. So where did the other 9.5 go? He spends 7 years stuck on the island of a goddess named Calypso, who won't let him leave. He spends a full year on Circe's island. The rest disappear into waiting for winds, for repairs, for a way out. And that's maybe the most honest thing in the whole poem. Because that's what the real sea did to the real crews. The danger was never that the ships were slow. The danger was that you could be stopped, held somewhere, with no way to send word home and no way to leave. You can see it in what happened to the other Greek heroes who left that same beach at Troy. Nestor sails straight home. A few days. Diomedes, 4 days. Menelaus gets blown to Egypt and takes 7 years to get back. Agamemnon gets home fast and is murdered at his own dinner table. Same fleet, same starting line. Getting home fast and getting home years late, never getting home at all. Every one of those was a normal outcome. The only thing that no sailor could promise was arriving on schedule. Now think about what that means for the people on shore. When a ship didn't come back, no news ever came. No wreckage washes up with an explanation. Nobody calls. A ship that's 10 years late and a ship at the bottom of the sea look exactly the same from the beach. He's being held up by a goddess, and he drowned off Cape Malea. From Ithaca, those two stories are identical. And maybe that's what the Odyssey really is. The story every waiting family told themselves, about every ship that didn't come back, told as if he might still walk through the door one day. Which means Penelope, the wife who waits 20 years on Ithaca, was never a side character. She's every person who ever stood on a shore doing that impossible math. The Greeks had a word for a homecoming from war, from Troy specifically, nostos. And they had a word for pain, algos. In 1688, a Swiss doctor named Johannes Hofer stitched together those two words to describe an illness he was seeing in soldiers working far from home, men who were literally becoming sick with missing home. He called it nostalgia, the ache of the homecoming, Odysseus' disease. That word has survived 30 centuries and we still use it, mostly for old songs and old photos now. But every time you feel it, you're speaking the language of those sailors, the ache of trying to get home. 3,000 years later, and we're still telling the story. This summer, millions of people will sit in a dark room and watch Odysseus set sail from Troy one more time. Still 565 miles, still not home yet.